Welcome to Diverse Learning Practices EdTalk podcast, where we are meeting the needs of all learners. I'm your host, Celeta Devine.
Good morning and welcome everyone to our fourth episode of Diverse Learning Practices EdTalk podcast, where we are meeting the needs of all learners. We want to welcome everyone today, and we're going to be discussing a very special topic about leadership, about purpose, and especially about helping young men discover the champion within themselves. This conversation matters because there are so many young men, especially of color, who are growing up without consistent mentorship, direction, and encouragement. In research, it continues to show that mentorship and positive support systems can dramatically improve academic success. It can improve confidence, and it can improve long-term outcomes for students. And so we have a very special guest today to help us unpack this topic by the name of Andrew McGee. He's the author of several books. He's a mentor, he's a speaker, and he is the owner of MACCAP Consulting, and he may go into that just a little bit. He's also a partner with Diverse Learning Practices. And through his work, he's committed to helping young men really recognize their value, to build their vision, and to overcome the barriers that often try to define their future. So, welcome, Mr. McGee.
Thank you, Ms. Devine. It's a pleasure of being here with you today.
Absolutely. So we're going to start out by you telling the audience just a little bit about your personal journey. What experiences shaped you to be the man and the educator you are today?
First of all, my personal journey started as underserved, marginalized, and lack of exposure student that attended Title I schools from K through 12th grade. And so my journey did not have a vision and was not exposed to any positive leadership. And so I lived in a community where the expectations were to make it on your own. Of course, my parents were they were my supporters, my mentors, but they were lacking education as well. And so I was propelled that I would navigate through this environment and the lack of expectation that limited opportunities for not just me, but for others in the community. And so my personal journey reminds me every day is that I have a mission, and my mission is to support those that we left behind. If you're familiar with, and I know you all are, with federal guidelines on No Child Left Behind. Well, though the children were left behind, the funds were too. And so I'm prepared to help navigate our boys and girls to see that their future is bright, can be bright, and that we're going to be champions throughout this process.
That's absolutely wonderful. And you are correct. And I know that you truly understand how someone believing in you and putting in time with you can absolutely, completely change the trajectory of one's life as it did for you. And so in case somebody out in our audience is still wondering why this conversation, why the focus on males, and especially why the focus on young men of color. Before we go into our conversation a little bit more, I just want to read a few statistics that surround young Black men of color. National data continues to show lower graduation rates, lower college completion rates, a higher rate in discipline and incarceration compared to many of their peers. Some studies even project that 1 in 5 Black men will experience incarceration during their lifetime. But at the same time, research also shows, and that's why Mr. McGee is with us today, that mentorship, leadership, and positive support systems also dramatically can change those outcomes. And that's why this conversation really matters to any educator. So in your book, you talk about 4 principles in your book, Think Like a Champion. So I want you to take the audience through those 4 principles and just tell us a quick personal definition of those principles.
First of all, when you look at a champion, we want to identify that there is a champion in yourself, in you. And that first principle of that is building a foundation. First, we've got to build a foundation. And in that chapter 1, it talks about where it begins, the foundation. And that foundation is to believe in yourself, self-esteem. The second thing in that believing in yourself is that you must believe that though the sky is the limit, it can be achieved. And
Absolutely.
that's one of the things we teach there. And so after we leave that principle there, then we go into vision. And before we can get into vision, we got to understand that you got to believe in yourself that you can do it. Then the vision is very important. I can't express that enough. I work with schools around the state of Georgia and around the states. We don't teach our children to dream and to dream big. Vision is a dream. Dream that you can come out of wherever situation you are, but dream that you can become a high school graduate. Dream that you can become the CEO of some bank or some company. And so we teach them that they need to dream and to have a vision. The other thing on the third one is that we teach leadership. And see, what we got to understand is that for Black males, it's important that we understand that leadership is not based on how we look or what we say or how we say things. Because too often as Black male, many of those that are working with us that are not females and males of color don't understand our language, our communication, how we trying to convey. And so in leadership, it is very important that we understand that what we're trying to convey is that we're leaders. We're leaders. We're leaders by design because somebody cared enough to take us through that process. And so we talk about that leadership. And leadership looks different for each person, for each organization, for each school. The other thing is that we talk about adversity. There are adversity that prevents us from doing what we need to do. However it is, we go back to that background of believing in ourselves that helps change the trajectory of why and where we are, especially as we move through adversity, because we are very much absolutely positive, convinced that we can do it.
Absolutely.
And so inside that, inside all of those 4 principles, those 4, we have to look at that. Those are the strategies that help prepare us to move from good to great. And here's the other thing about that. Though I focus on males of color, in my book, there's a couple of females of color came to me and said, Mr. McGee, I know this book is for males of color, but these same principles you taught us, and I was a part of that group. I've been able to implement those, and I'm very successful. And she's a teacher today.
Absolutely. That's great. Absolutely. So if you would just run us back through those principles one more time, because somebody might want to jot them down. What was principle number 1?
Principle number 1 is you got to build a foundation.
Okay. Principle number 2.
And principle number 2, you got to have a vision.
All right. And number 3?
You got to have leadership. Got to have leadership. Because see, our folks can lead now. Don't get it twisted. They can lead. Mm-hmm. And then number 4 is adversity, because number 1 teaches us how we can better ourselves and champion ourselves through any adversity. And we do absolutely well at doing that.
I love it. These are great principles. And like you said, there is a focus of young men of color, but these are principles that can apply to anyone, any age, who may be wanting to grow and to become better. So one of the things when you and I talked before, you mentioned that no one really took the time to develop your leadership. No one was taking the time to help you to develop your vision. And when it did happen, it just so happened that it was from someone who didn't look like you that allowed you to begin to recognize your potential. So can you take us back to that moment and talk about how it changed the trajectory of your life?
I was in the 11th grade down in the state of Mississippi and had this young lady who I still stay in touch with today. And she was not an educator, but she was a part of the education system. She was not a part of my family. She did not live in my community, but she took an interest in me. She took an interest in me and decided to reach out to me. She asked, could I mentor you? And in my mind, as a young male of color, I'm asking, why you want to mentor me? What's wrong with me? Come on, y'all. Let's be real. And so I said, I'm fine. I don't have anything that I need to worry about. And so she was consistent. I've got to give her that. She was consistent. And so she said to me again, she said, I want to be your mentor. I want to make sure that the system that you are currently in, education, so your journey does not end with a story untold. Now I'm in 11th grade, one more year. So I said, okay, you can help me. And she'll tell you this day, I said, first thing you could do, I'm an 11th grade male student now. You can buy me a car.
Not a car.
She said, no, it's not a car. She says, what I want to do is to help you get through 11th grade, go to 12th grade, and go to college. You got to remember, I'm a Title I student. And as you said, your statistics is 1 out of 5 males are going incarcerated. And what you also mentioned, but did not come out and say, is that we spend more money in the judicial system, meaning jails, prisons, than we do in education. Research shows that.
Yes.
So this lady says, I want to help you. Okay. I want to challenge you to think outside the walls. Here's the vision. This is where she began to help me with vision. I want you to visualize where you want to go and what you want to do. And I said, no one has ever stopped to tell me that or talk to me about that or teach me that. She said, okay. She says that challenge is the absence of mentorship, but it's also a meaningful guidance. She says, I want to do that for you as well. I want to help guide you through a process called success, where you can beat statistics. Wait a minute now. I said, this lady don't look like me. What's in it for her? She's married, got children, very well established. I'm like, okay. So she did. Now, here's the thing that really took me by surprise. And I talk about this every time I'm speaking. What took me by surprise is that she didn't talk the talk. She walked it. This lady showed up in my community. Everybody looking, I know she's lost. And so, graduation date. Not only did she show up at my graduation, she also showed up at my house to remind me that I was a part of your support group and that this support does not end here. I want to help you to not only apply for college, but I need to help you stay in college. I said, okay, because see, what we fail to realize, statistics show that we may enter college, but we exit before we graduate.
Absolutely.
And so that's one of the reasons why she wanted to make sure I finished the process of going to college. And
absolutely. And I really like that. And one of the things that's standing out to me as you're speaking about it, and maybe for some people in our audience, and I definitely want to take everything that we're talking about today and think about how can that be applicable to the person who's in education right now. And so what you're describing is a person who, number one, has a good heart. And I'm sure that She had her subject area that she taught and what she was hired to do at that school, but she herself went beyond to look for and had the heart and the mission to help someone else. And so when I think about a lot of teachers who are in the classroom and they may feel like, I don't know how to connect or really get this person involved, we can glean a lot from the story that you told us about this individual. It kind of boils down to having the heart for it and understanding that your educational purpose definitely goes beyond just teaching your subject matter. You have to love what you do and love the people that you are doing it for.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And so from all that, to sum it up in a nutshell on that, is why we do the work we do with Maycap
Absolutely.
Consulting. Is because schools and community must intentionally create environment that inspire vision, allow opportunity for mentorship, and remind students that their future can be brighter than their circumstances.
That
See,
is wonderful.
every parent is a teacher, but not every teacher is a parent.
We'll let that sink in. And studies do continue to show that exposure, mentorship, and just having someone who believes in students can significantly influence long-term outcomes. And that leads us to one of the, and you've already spoke about it a little bit, to the principle of vision. And I want to ask you, why is vision and that belief system so critical for young men of color, particularly those coming from undeserved or Title I environments? Why is that so critical?
See, if we have no vision, we have no presence, and we have no future. Because it is important to understand that once our boys and girls begin to creatively think that they can and they will, that's vision.
Yeah.
But when you idled and don't know when you're in the 9th grade what you want to do, where you want to go, that's lack of vision.
Absolutely. And so it reminds me of a couple of quotes that I've had some administrators say, and one of them, they would say every day, if you believe you can, you can. And then another one is, if you can conceive it, believe it, then you can achieve it.
Well,
and
that is awesome.
That's really powerful. And again, trying to make what you're saying really applicable to the educator today. And they're thinking about, what can I do? Then you're telling us, help students to visualize who they can become, help to develop the vision of who they can become.
Absolutely. One of the things that you were talking about, those quotes in the program that I work with schools and special students and any student and teachers that I've provided technical support to, is one of the things that we have to do. And I talked about it earlier about believing yourself. Here's the things I remind them every day, and they have to say this to build that into their belief, is that I can do it, I can do it, I know I can, and I will. When they begin to internalize that they can, then that makes that vision or those challenges less of a headache, because they are determined and they believe and understand that it's possible, and it
Absolutely.
works.
Absolutely. That repetition of saying those different quotes, that's not just for elementary students.
no.
That is very important to our secondary students as well. Because many students, they have the ability, but sometimes they are struggling to actually see what is possible beyond what they've already experienced. So in your experience, what are some of the biggest barriers that prevent students from just naturally having this vision or developing a vision? What are some things that are getting in the way?
One of them, and I remind students every day, or teachers every day, that this is important because it affected me as well. And that is challenge. Preventing students from developing a clear vision, which is a lack of exposure and belief. So the first one is challenge, which equates to a lack of exposure and belief. If I do not have any exposure of great jobs in my neighborhood, and I talk about it in my book, if I do not see people that look like me, or if I don't see people that inspires me, then that's a challenge. So lack of exposure and belief is one of the barriers. The second one is absent mentorship and meaningful guidance. Absent mentorship and meaningful guidance. I talked about earlier the young lady that mentored me that did not look like me. And so if we do not have that in our environment, in our schools, and in our community, then that becomes a big challenge for us, a barrier for us, because I can't become great if I don't have anybody to lead me or to give me guidance or to give me directions on how. So that's very important. I spent 5 years working in the Department of Juvenile Justice as Director of Federal Program. And one of the things that I reminded boys and girls there is that your current and your past life experience not dictate your future. Because what you can do is that you can change your trajectory right now. The other piece is, the other challenge is fear, self-doubt. We become fear of moving forward because self-doubt is in our mind that we can't do it. So that's why I reminded you, or that's why I said to you, I repeat with them every day. It becomes a creed, and then it becomes a declaration that I can do it, I know I can, and I will. And when you begin to change that mindset of those boys and girls to thinking that, hey, fear can no longer have me hostage, and that self-doubt has to move out my way. And now I am ready to move forward. And so that's the third one. Those three challenges there, those three barriers prevent students from developing a clear vision and a future.
Absolutely. I love those. And again, it really boils down to mindset. As a man thinketh, so is he. And so as an educator, I'm in the classroom, what can I do is just speaking positively, having those different things implemented into your classroom, having those personal conversations with your students, building relationships. And then also when you talk about exposure, sometimes if you're in your classroom, that one seems a little harder for the educator to actually influence. And it brings me back to the time when there was more collaboration between the churches and the community and the schools. So there are things that teachers, principals, administrators can do to help find that exposure for students in their local community. And what I found is when we do contact, whether it is a church or a business, they are typically looking for ways to be incorporated into the school system. I have never reached out to any of those types of organizations, and there was like, oh no, I'm not sure if we can do that. They're excited to do it. So those are very good points. We're going to move on and we're going to talk about another principle in your book, and that's just leadership in general. And so we hear that word quite a bit, but authentic leadership can look very different from influence or popularity. So I want to ask you, what does authentic leadership look like for young men today? And how can schools intentionally help to cultivate authentic leadership?
Authentic leadership for young men of color. And I'm reminded of myself back then, and I'm reminded of the young men that I work with today. Start with self-awareness, integrity, and service. Those three things. Because first of all, real leadership is rooted in character. Let me tell you what I'm saying. Is that first of all, young men, they are human first. before you begin to teach them, before you begin to support them, you've got to understand that they are human beings and that they want to be treated with integrity. They want to be treated with respect. And they know if you got a game going on with them. And so, first of all, you've got to build a relationship that's authentic. See, you
Yes.
may not quite understand where they live. And although I encourage, if you're going to understand, if you're going to try to work with, you need to at least know something about them. You need to know something about their community. And so that's real leadership rooted in character because it's relationship. And then the other thing, it's the ability to remain grounded in your values, to lead with empathy, because they come packing with so many trauma, with so much things that have happened in their community and in their home. And so we've got to understand how we can positively influence others, even when we're not watching. And so those men, those young men, they understand what relationship is. I also believe that authentic leadership requires young men of color to embrace their full identity unapologetically. Here's what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. Though I may not agree with you, and though my language does not represent a high school graduate, here's the beauty of it. You as leadership gets to help change that language so that it does represent who he is and who he's trying to convey to. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
See,
it does.
and so that's what we do. So leadership, authentic leadership, is demonstrating courage, accountability, emotional intelligence, but most of all, resilience. See, young men don't need somebody to be their friend. They need somebody to help lead them so that they can, in return, lead somebody else from their community. That's
Yeah,
authentic leadership.
absolutely. And I like that you started with just the authenticity starts with building relationships with those students and being intentional about that and doing it from a place of authenticity yourself. So those are really good as far as developing leaders. And I think that I like what you said about giving them the charge of developing other leaders. So now we're going to work on your leadership. And as you become better, it is your charge to think about and look for other people who you can now help to guide yourself. And that is very powerful. And I can remember being in the classroom talking to some young men. And one of the things that I would get, they would respond well to me telling them that you are a leader.
That's right.
You are a leader.
Right.
But right now, you might be leading in the wrong way. You have to use your superpower of leadership for positive, for good of this classroom, of this school, of your community, and of the world. So you have God-given leadership skills. I need you to refine them and make sure that something good is coming from how you are leading others.
Absolutely.
So that's good. One thing too that I found especially interesting in our previous discussion was where you talked about flexibility. And we often teach students how to work hard, how to be successful, but the one path is not always what it's going to be. There may be multiple ways to a given outcome. So you talk about mentorship and systems, tutoring, work ethic, adaptability, and multiple pathways to success. So tell us, why is it important for you to include flexibility as a principle?
Here's why it's important. But before I tell you that, I've got to go back up a minute because what you just said about leadership, when you were in there, you told them that they have leadership. But here's what we as a school district or community must do is that we must create space where student voice is valued.
Yes.
Where student voice is valued. They are not penalized on the way they're thinking, but we must provide an opportunity or representation that expands their voice, which also support leadership. And then we can look at how leadership is looked at. Flexibility is important. Here's the reason why. And I'm talking about myself back then, is that oftentimes we look at one road straight. And what we fail to realize is that on that road, there are different streets that may turn off from that one road, but we stay on that same road, going to one destination, but fail to merge to the right or to the left so that we can go to a new destination that we may not be familiar with. So what I said about flexibility is that we must not lock ourselves down into one area. We must come out of that box so we can expand to see that there's more to becoming a champion than what that one road is. And I tell you, as we talk about school, one of the flexibility now they have dual enrollment is because you become flexible in thinking that, hey, I've got one thing starting now, which is high school. But while I'm doing high school, the beauty of it, I got the opportunity to dual enrollment, where by the time I finish high school, hey, I got an associate degree. When I become flexible, not if, but when I'm flexible, I take advantage of all the opportunities available for me. And opportunity also helps me to not just become a stronger leader, but it also helps me become a stronger person. So that flexibility means that I got more than one thing to look at. I got two, I got three, I got four. And so that's creativity. That your mind now is beginning to expand and nothing can stop you. Remember, I talked about it. The sky gonna be the limit. You're gonna reach it, right? Here's the rationale with that sky being the limit, because now you are exposed to many things that you need to do. Upon graduation of high school, I was faced with this. I'm graduating from high school. And the other thing, I had a job. I had to rearrange my schedule so that I would be able to attend graduation practice. I had to rearrange my schedule so I can go to work. Then the other thing, be flexible. I had to be flexible with things that if I'm an athlete, that I got my schedule there so that I can make sure that I can get everything in that I so desire. That's flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And when students, individuals, adults even do not lean into the idea of flexibility when they are faced with something that requires them to now be flexible, that's where we get a lot of agitation, conflict, and possibly even quitting the process because they don't understand that this is just what happens with leadership. I have to be able to lean into flexibility. I do want to ask you if you could sit down with every young man of color who feels overlooked, who feels discouraged, or they may feel underestimated, what would you want them to know about their potential?
Wow. Wow. That's a big task. And the reason why I say that is because that's needed. I
Absolutely.
sat down with folks in Dewey County, high school students that I sat down with maybe 2 weeks ago. And we talked about this. We talked about where they are. We talked about their circumstances. But here's what I said to them. Your circumstances does not define your potential. Your circumstances does not determine your destination. Here's why I say that. It's because you may feel overlooked, underestimated, and I have, unheard. You may feel that your voice does not matter, and that could be the case. But what I want you to know is that you have the autonomy to rewrite your story.
I love that.
I
I love
gave
that.
each person a pen. And I said, you have the autonomy to rewrite your story, to rewrite your narrative. But here's the beauty of it all. As you prepare to rewrite your story, I encourage you to keep believing in yourself, even when the journey feels difficult. Believe in yourself. I remind them that they are somebody. And
Mhm.
then at the end of their journey, at the end of writing their story, they get to sign off with their signatures saying, I made a change or I made a new commitment. And see, here's the thing is, and when they looked at what I was proposing to them, one said, I could really be an engineer. And that touched me. And I said, why did you say that? She said, no one has ever stopped to tell me I can rewrite my story.
That's so powerful.
See,
Very good.
I reminded them at the end is that you do not give anybody permission to end your story, not to end your story, because at the end of the story, I said to all of them, I want to be able to say, I read your story, and your story at the end says you're a judge, you're a teacher, you're an engineer, you wherever you are. But here's the beautiful thing that why I thought that was important that I sit down and talk with them. Now, you got to catch this. I'm going to tell you this why. The reason why you and I do the work we do is because we have a personal investment in the boys and girls we work with the
Mhm.
teachers, with the principal that we support. And here's why. It's because when they finish school, I want them to be productive enough to have a career, to have a job that
Mhm.
pays them so that one day I can get my Social Security check.
Absolutely.
So they're going
Absolutely.
to be putting money into the system. So I got to make sure I do my part.
So that belief is super important. And I think also them understanding that they possess the equipment, they have everything that they need in their possession already to be successful, regardless of your background, your community, your parents, even when you get to a certain age, what they may have done or what they may not have done. They have the power to make a decision of who they want to be, regardless of any circumstance. And I used to get my students to recite a poem by Edgar Guest. And a part of it says, figure it out for yourself, my lad. You were born with all that the great have had: 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 hands, and 2 eyes, and a brain to use if you would be wise. With this equipment, they all began. So start from the top and say, I can. And that was the equipment. And it's just all about a belief system. And so as we're working with educators, and they are trying to figure out, how can I reach? How can I reach? Begin with transitioning and helping students to build that foundation of believing in themselves. As we close, I want to bring us back to the heart behind your message. After our listeners finish reading A Champion Within, what do you hope ultimately will impact them? What do you want to stay with them?
What I want to stay with them, what I found is that the book was written for male students of color. But what has happened because of the message in the book is that we have teachers and adults that are reading
Yeah.
books more so. And so here's what I'm expecting is a deeper understanding that greatness already exists within them. It really does.
Yes,
And that
yes.
it doesn't have to be created from scratch. It just have to be developed. And so my goal is for students to see that their background, challenges, or current environment is temporary
Mm.
because inside them is a champion that can change their story, can change their narrative. For students, I want them to lead with vision. I want them to lead with confidence and practical tools that take ownership of their future. I need them to feel empowered that they can and that they will. For educators, I want them to develop, I want them to lead with a vision. And I also want them to have the importance of what a relationship is and belief and intentional development that all students can and shall be champions. I need them to support that piece. And for the communities, here's for the communities. What I want to do is to spark a renewed commitment that investing in young people consistently, early, and meaningfully. And when all of those three areas that I talked about, student, I talked about educators and community, when all of this is adhered to, I believe that we can begin to change the community that we live in and the community that we serve, which is a school. We can come together to build champions, and they can leave our schools as graduates of champions. They can leave our communities and can return them back to our community to support those that are left behind.
Absolutely. All right. This has been a wonderful conversation, a champion within. And I believe that students can do that their teachers and educators in the community and the school systems, we can do a better job. We can continue the work and we can do an even better job with the principles that we have discussed today. Mr. McGee, I want to give you an opportunity to share with our listeners how they can actually get in contact with you if they would like to know more about some of the literature that you have written, or if they just want to engage with you further. I'll give you that time to just share how they can get in contact with you.
Thank you. Thank you. You can visit our website, which is at www.macap all in one word, .com. You can also reach out to us via email at macap, MACCAP, consulting @gmail.com. We are open, willing, and ready to serve you in the community, you in the schools, administrators. We want to be there to help propel those great leaders that you are preparing to lead, not for the future, but for the present.
Absolutely. So we'll make sure we drop that information down with the information from the podcast so you all can get it there as well. And again, we thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And we wish you well in all of your future endeavors. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in.
Thank you for tuning in to Diverse Learning Practices EdTalk podcast. Don't forget to follow and share. Until next time, keep teaching, keep growing, and keep making a difference.